Hello and welcome. This is Background Screening Tips and Tech with me, Tim Santoni, and my co-host, Joe Buerlen. Joe, how are things going?
Things are going well, man.
Good, good. Well, today we want to we have a theme to this episode. It's going to be a little bit different. And we're just talking about, between us, Joe and I, we're talking about, what to expect as we enter into the fall and winter months and into the new year. And we're hearing a lot of challenges out there from a lot of HR and a lot of HR departments, as well as just people, parents and kids and business owners. And so the theme of this show, we're going to let Joe take the lead on this one. And we're going to fill you in on from a background screening perspective, our insights and our thoughts. So Joe, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. We titled the show "Winter is Coming," and if you're a Game of Thrones fan, you understand what that means, and kind of thinking about what happened over the last year. Right, winter is coming. It's going to get colder for some of us, a lot colder for some of us. It's going to get a little bit darker, a little bit earlier in the day. But there's some things, right? I mean, there's this enemy, so to speak, that's kind of still out there. That there's not a ton of information about, right? We know that COVID has morphed into something other than what it was when it started, but we're not sure exactly what that is. But there are some things that we know from the spring that happened that I think are going to carry over into this winter, and HR needs to be prepared for. I think the background screening industry needs to be prepared for. And so those are kind of some of the things that we wanted to talk about today is how to arm ourselves against this enemy in winter coming.
Yeah, definitely. And I think from our perspective, I think that more specifically, there's some things that are out there. We know that the COVID situation is out there. So we have businesses trying to go back to work and they have, flu seasons upon us. And so I think we're going to see employers that are dealing with employees that are symptomatic of flu-like symptoms, and they're going to have to deal with, how do you deal with that? Are we going to get them tested? Are we going to keep them home? Are we going to keep our doors closed even if the restrictions are lifted? That's one big thing. I think the other part of it too is as those workforces return, are we going to rescreen all of them, do background checks? Are we going to just look at criminal monitoring? And also too, unfortunately, in these times, our employer is going to be burdened with the responsibility of screening and monitoring for social media. And that means any kind of race-related posts or any political-related posts that could come back to harm them down the road, whether that's their reputation, the risk, the harm to both their internal teams, their external teams, their clients, their partners. So I think that those three areas are the things that we're concerned about. And I think that they're going to unfortunately work together to make it challenging for the HR professional, for the business owner to operate and continue to operate through the fall and into the holiday season and then into the new year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you hit the nail on the head, right? There's those things that we know are going to happen, and I think one of them is, you know, I think we're seeing it in some of the schools. Some of the schools around me here in Ohio have gone back, and some of the schools have had to take a couple steps back and pull themselves out because they've had some outbreaks. Whether it's the flu or COVID, they don't know right away. Kid ends up with a fever. He's got the cough. He's got to get tested. Now, maybe it's just the flu, but it takes him and a few other kids that he's been around, possibly the teacher, out of the game for at least a few days. And if it does end up being COVID, at least a couple weeks. I think employers need to think about that, right? And as background screening partners, we need to think about that for our clients and our partners in this space. It's one of those things that what other services are your background screening provider giving to you to help mitigate some of those stresses that we know are coming down. So I think you hit the nail on the head, right? um, you know Instant COVID testing, right? I see some providers starting to offer that service, and that's going to be huge for HR. Maybe you have new employees, right? New employees came on. They just started working with the company. They're in their 90-day period. They don't have health insurance yet. They end up getting sick. Is it something the employer can provide the employee during this tough time? I think it's a great applicant employee experience. But maybe it helps out some way with insurance costs for the employer, right? The health insurance costs, not sending every single employee to the doctor when they get sick, but being able to kind of do it in house. So I think that's kind of a cool thing that the background screening industry is starting to adapt and being able to offer the end user.
Yeah, definitely. And I think whether it's a new employee or it's existing workforce or someone who's returning, I think that whether they're dealing with a childcare situation in the employment space or just in general, there's just a general fear of what if I get sick, what if I exhibit symptoms, how do I proceed, how do I not cause issues with other folks. And because there's so many unknowns, and there will continue to be so many unknowns, I think one of the challenge will be, as businesses, as parents, how do you continue that normalcy and kind of being redundant? So if we're as a background screening partner relying upon courts, but the courts don't treat it seriously and they have to work remote, that's troublesome to us, right? If our clients are dealing with it and they can't deliver the services and products, some of them, healthcare and really critical products, delivery services, food, things like that, right? So I think that it comes down to the C word, which we've talked about a lot about, Joe, is communication, right? How are you communicating not just with your background screening partner, but all the other partners that support you and your business throughout, to make sure that you kind of have that continuity of service, that continuity of product, whether it's with your supply chain or your people, to make sure that your products and services can be brought to market in a way that makes sense. And that goes everything from, what you do at home to in the workplace to everyone that you're interacting with. And I think that the complexities of that are going to compound. I mean, for instance, like out here right now in California, we got some crazy wildfires burning in Orange County. We have uh, power outages that are being in place because they're fearful of power lines being down. So people that are working remote and people that are going to school remote cannot even remote in because the power companies have shut those things down. Those things are normally a problem, but in these times, they're even compounded by the fact that people are relying on their home network and their electricity. We've had, evacuations and other things. So, this is a constant communication battle and a constant adaptivity situation where you got to adapt to the current situations as we move through this.
Yeah, I think communication's one of the biggest things that tends to lack sometimes in the partnership between a company and their background screening partner. This is a perfect time. You brought it up, but I'll touch on this a little bit of a separate subject. But you know, communicate. There's certain companies that may see an influx in hiring. I think we saw that in the spring, right? Grocers, chemical companies, things of that nature. They saw an influx of employees, and other companies saw a decline in employees, or they had to lay people off. I think either way that your company has to go in those times, communicate with your background screening provider. See if there's other services that they offer that can help you out at those times. I know some companies that offer exit interviewing, for example, took a lot of pressure and a lot of stress off of HR at times, especially if you're having to do an influx of employees that you have to lay off because of COVID. Vice versa. You know that you're going to have to bring in an influx of people. You're going to have to hire 100, 200, 300 people. Communicate that with your background screening provider. Maybe there's something they can do to help adjust costs. Maybe there's things that they can help add or subtract from your program that are going to be beneficial to you in the long run. But either way, regardless of what direction your company is being pulled in this whole thing, the biggest key is communicating with your background screening partner.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Joe. And in the situation where a company's trying to scale up quickly and they're adding hundreds of employees, where maybe their in-house recruiting and talent teams aren't equipped to do that, they will be outsourcing that to managed service providers, recruiting and staffing companies. And so it's important that you communicate to your staffing and recruiting and other people that are bringing you talent what your policies and procedures are around background checks. Because the worst thing would be, especially if you're in a compliant industry like finance or maybe transportation, and you bring in these folks through these other avenues, you're spending time and resources to scale up more so than you would normally when you do it directly. And then they can't either pass compliance audit tests, can't, the background checks are a problem, and you end up throwing good money after bad in the sense that you're spending all these times to ramp up. But then when it's all said and done, 6, 12, 18 months, those people are turning over and you're spending even more time and more resources and you're not getting any further ahead. So those are all considerations, especially when you're trying to change on the fly very, very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so for me, I think looking at the winter coming and kind of getting your arsenal in place, so to speak, if you're in HR, a few things. Criminal monitoring, I think you mentioned. Social media screening. Let your background screening provider handle that. I know it's real easy for HR to be able to get on a computer, look at some things on Facebook, and make a determination. The problem is you can't unsee some things that you see. You probably shouldn't be making hiring decisions based on everything you see on social media. So let a professional not only look at that for you, but guard you and help guard you from that. And then, like I said in the beginning, COVID testing and COVID assessments. Two things that I've heard multiple background screening companies are starting to offer. Talk with your partner, check and see if they're offering those things. But I think if you can get those three things right now into the game, you'd be good to go. The other thing that I would suggest is an IT checkup. So if you're using an applicant tracking system, if you're using an HRIS, and it's in any way integrated with your background screening company, have the conversation. How are things running? Should we add some customizations? Is that possible? Would that help? With that influx of employees, is the hiring process different? Have those conversations, get those things in order. And then as we go into the winter and kind of some of those unknowns maybe start to happen, you're already prepared, you're set up, you're good to go.
Yeah, that's a great point too. And I think that, one of the things that comes to mind before we let you guys go around is that obviously too, people in the hospitality travel industries that have been decimated as a result of the COVID outbreaks, those folks are not going back to jobs in those same roles. So those people are going to be entering into positions and be searching for jobs. So there is talent out there. But remember, they're coming from different industries. So that could skew your trends. You could see different things when it comes to your substance abuse. You could see increases in dilutes or positive tests in your background screening. You could see more hit rates. So again, make aware to your teams that are working on with regard to talent acquisition and screening about those changes, and be aware of those numbers. So you're seeing how those things impact you, because you can make better decisions about who you're going to recruit, how you're going to recruit them, and from where, and how that impacts your overall onboarding time and turnarounds and costs, because we're going to see that shift, and that shift is coming. And I think it's going to continue as we move through into 2021. Oh, well, thanks again, Joe, for joining me today on the podcast. Again, you can pick us up wherever you download your podcast. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and many other places. And if you want to watch the vidcast, you can always check us out on YouTube, where we upload our videos every week. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we look forward to connecting with you on a future episode. If you have any questions, please leave them for us in the comments, and we will talk soon. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.